Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and we're here for another edition of the Astro Weather. And you can tell what I'm going to be talking about later today in the show, and that is when James Morrison and the Doors, specifically Jim Morrison, because today is Jim Morrison's birthday. And so we're going to look at his chart, and we're also going to look at his relocated chart, because it is a proper lesson in relocation. Once you take his chart, move across the country to Southern California, Hollywood specifically, boy, does it look like Jim Morrison. Not that the natal chart goes away. It's still there. Trust me, it's still there. But the forces of the relocated charts are ignited. We'll get into some of the Laurel Canyon stuff too, which I think is valid. By the way, if Jim Morrison were alive today, he would be 80 years old. Wrap your head around that. Today is Jim Morrison's 80th birthday. And to the Doors, John Densmore and Robbie Krieger are still around. They're still alive. And they're still, I think, fairly active and still making music. And have a very interesting legacy with the Lizard King. So we're going to get into, basically what I'll do is I'll do the Astro Weather, and we'll look at the Astro Weather, and then we'll do the Star of the Day, which is going to be Morrison, and we'll look at both his natal chart and his relocated chart. And then we get into some of the Laurel Canyon stuff and the effect that Jim Morrison had on the 1960s and culture in general. I'll save my commentary for when we dive into it. And I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. I'm in kind of a sober mood today. I wouldn't say somber, but I'm definitely in a sober mood. Maybe it's the moon. Maybe it's this balsamic moon hanging out in the final degree. I think it's final degrees of Capricorn. But I'm in a very sober mood, and sober is good, because a lot of times when a person is feeling sober, they're theoretically able to articulate their thoughts. Nothing is competing for its attention or the thought's attention. So we'll see where my sober mood, it's not somber, but we'll see where my sober mood takes me. Let me just see something here. Just gotta check my messages. Okay. All right. How is everyone? Let's see who we have here. There's my man DJ MC checking in from the 925. Simple Rick, I gotta put this up again. In my next life, I hope I'm not a Pisces again. Well, I guess theoretically, Rick, you're cycling out, right? It's the final sign. Maybe if you're lucky, you get to come back as an Aries. If you even want to come back at all. Because maybe that would be the next iteration of the wheel, right? Or who knows? Maybe you get to pick your sign next time. But it's always funny. Those things don't always work out that way. Well, that way. It's like 3 wishes. Sometimes those 3 wishes don't always work out the way you want them to. Oh, look who's here. Look who's here. He's no Pisces. He says, I'm a Taurus. I'm a Taurus. I'm a boss. Look at him. Look at the boss. Glad you're here. Glad you're here, Jasper. Jasper's going to have a new home starting next weekend. So yeah, let me talk a little bit about that. Rick, I hope that you come back as whatever sign you want to be, or not at all. Whatever you want to do. It's your choice. It's your journey, and it's your relationship with the God, right? The high command. It's your relationship with the high command. And, Pisces is such a fascinating sign. Our Joni is a Pisces, and she reminded me of what a Pisces she is by sending me some of her artwork that she had done. I'm like, wow, man, Pisces are really fucking artistic, right? I mean, it's the plus side of the Pisces. You know, you get the artistic and creative side of being a Pisces, and there's not one single Pisces I've ever met, maybe the exception of my mother, that isn't creative. They're all creative. There's a famous interview with, or it's an infamous interview with Quincy Jones. And it's like one of the last interviews he did, I think. He may have done one or two after them. I don't know. But it was, I think, for Billboard magazine, maybe Billboard or Rolling Stone. And Quincy Jones just went off. And he was talking about being a Pisces. And the interviewer was a Pisces too. So Quincy Jones was very excited about that. And he's like, it's the best fucking sign. The best fucking sign. And so it works for Quincy. Just saying. Just saying. Simple Rick, we hope you wind up wherever you want to be and whatever you want to be. Soul Traveler, good morning. Been cooking all morning. Made bean soup, chicken croquettes with rice. Nice to come home to after kids' horseback lessons. That sounds very nurturing. That sounds very Cancerian. Soul Traveler. Here's my man T. Jordan. Oh, we got a Axel the History Kid sighting in the house. What's going on, Axel? My younger brother from another mother. How are you? Road Trip 1981. Check it in. Katie. Hi, Katie. Fantastic in the house. Cato. Hi, Cato. Charlie. Jay Leno died. Really? Is that true? Is that true? It's funny. I've been thinking a lot about Taurus lately. Let's see. Let's see. Not seeing any news. I don't see it. I don't see it. No news on Jay Leno. Let's go to Twitter. Let's check the Twitter feed. Shall we? Yeah. No Jay Leno. You may want to check your sources. Just say it. But I have been thinking about Taurus a lot, and specifically how they're so good at money. I was thinking about Pat McAfee, who is fucking worth so much money, and a guy that punted a football, right? That's what he did for a living in the NFL. He punted a football. He wasn't a quarterback, wasn't a running back, wasn't a wide receiver. He was a punter. And Pat's a Taurus. And I was listening to the radio today, and he sounds a lot like Rob Gronkowski. They sound a lot alike. And I thought to myself, is this Pat McAfee? And Rob Gronkowski is fucking filthy rich. I'm like, I think Gronkowski's a Taurus too. And I looked him up, and he's a Taurus as well. So I've been thinking about Taurus. Jay Leno's a Taurus. You can see it in his car collection. The guy is into things, right? I think a day ago he was driving a Cybertruck. Logan Grimes. What's going on, Logan? Sherry Hart. I'm combative, and yes, it's a mood for sure. Combative. How long is it going to take for people to just start throwing fists? I think we're getting close. I was talking with, texting back and forth with S.J. Anderson on Twitter, and we were talking about this big Mars cycle coming in 2024, where it's like in Cancer and Leo in Cancer for a very long time, and it mirrors the Mars cycle from the Carter era and from when I was born in 1960, where Mars was in Cancer for almost like a fucking year, I think, with its various retrograde peregrinations. And I thought to myself, well, this is, the United States is a Cancerian country. And I feel like this is where everything's going to start to get very defensive. I'm going to go into that on Sunday night. I'm going to go into that Mars cycle on Sunday night. So we can go back to 1960, go back to the Carter era, and then, see where we can find some commonalities with these extended Mars Cancer retrograde and direct cycles. And I when it was the Carter era, it was so demoralizing. It was and it was all intentional. It was all freaking intentional. Jimmy Carter here's my theory on Jimmy Carter. My theory on Jimmy Carter is that he was a Democrat deep state version of Donald Trump at the time. That's my theory on Jimmy Carter. Why do I say that? Because Jimmy Carter came out of fucking nowhere. And he was a member of both the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. He was their candidate. And once Nixon won in 1972, with the insertion of the neocons, who were all gathering around him, people like Dick Cheney and Roger Stone and Don Rumsfeld, all those characters get their start in the Nixon administration. There was a thought that the Democrats would never emerge again, ever. And because of the debacle of the 60s and Johnson and the war, and of course Nixon won in landslide fashion in both of his elections, 68 and 72. But they had to get him out. That's a whole other show, which I've talked a lot about. And you had Gerald Ford, who was on the Warren Commission, a total deep state freak show, whose real name is Leslie King. It's not, and there's a whole thing with parentage and taking different names and all that shit, right? And, as I've talked about before, he's a very prominent figure in the transformation of America with Kathy O'Brien, because she's from Michigan, and that's where Gerald Ford is from. And I think he's one of her bodies, right? And there's others from Michigan as well. The governor of Michigan at that time was, I think, one of her first bodies. She was young. She was maybe 7, 8 years old. So you have this Ford character. And how many assassination attempts were there made on him? I know there was at least one. There might have been two. And he was very inept. He was always clocking people with golf balls, and he was a running joke on the Tonight Show. Johnny Carson was always making fun of Gerald Ford, and he was such an easy candidate to beat. And Jimmy Carter comes out of nowhere, right? He's from the South. He's a Libra. He's got this kind of aw shucks populist drawl. He's been married to Rosalind Carter, who just passed away. There's no. Carter's an interesting character. We're going to get to the weather, I promise. But Carter's an interesting character because in many ways he's the perfect Manchurian candidate. He's a Christian. He's from the South. He served in the Navy. He's got an engineering background, right? He's got the grand old Dom, mother, Lillian. He's got the crazy cracker brother and Billy. So he just checks all these boxes, right? He is the Democratic populist. So they're going populist. And he's backed by big forces. Trilateral Commission, Council for Relations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they run a third-party candidate, John Anderson, to split the vote. And he beats Ford, not by a large margin. And it feels to me like, now what's interesting is that, I don't know how the fuck it happened, but Gerald Ford beat out Ronald Reagan in the primary. I thought to myself, well, this is crazy. Looking back on it, and just how popular Reagan would become 4 years later. And I think Carter was part of the formula. Right. It was kind of like, you can just see how it's, problem, reaction, solution. The problem was George Bush Jr. The reaction is we never won it again. The solution is Barack Obama. Barack Obama is the problem, right? The reaction is we never won it again. The solution is Donald Trump. And it's almost like the previous presidents set up the next candidate, but they're all part of this continuum. And Carter falls into that territory because the country still, whatever you think of Richard Nixon, the country still hadn't washed its mouth out with Richard Nixon and Watergate. And Ford was, by association, considered part of the Nixon regime, and only because Nixon had to accept Ford as vice president once they got Spiro Agnew out. He was forced on Nixon. Nixon didn't want him as his vice president. So here comes Carter, and here comes the demoralization program. And again, Mars is in Cancer for a large period of the Carter era, right? And it's Mars in Cancer is not the best position for Mars, unless, of course, you're defending something, like you're defending your territory or your family, or you're engaged in grassroots kinds of operations, which is very Mars in Cancer. But as far as being forthright and active, it's not the best Mars. It operates, sideways, backwards. I have Mars in Cancer. If there was one planet I could swap in my chart, it would be Mars in Cancer. And I don't like talking about my chart too much, but in my progress chart, my Mars is retrograde, and I played with it to see, well, is there any fucking chance that Mars could actually go direct? And maybe by the end of my life, I just might, taste a little bit of Mars in Leo. Oh no. I'm going to have to live to the ripe old age of 163 for that to happen. So bring on the med beds, so I can eventually get that Mars in Leo. Anyway, I know a lot about Mars in Cancer, since I'm the owner of one. The only thing I can say in defense of Mars is that it isn't a grand trine. So I got a little grand trine action happening with Venus and Chiron. It's kind of a unique grand trine. So there's that redeeming value. It's at 0 degrees, so it's about as Marsy and Cancer as it gets. And then squares my sun, which I think is probably not a bad thing. Gives me a little bit of fighting spirit. Only if I defend. Anytime I ever started a fight, I always got my ass kicked. But anytime I had to defend myself or another person, I did pretty well. There's your lesson for Mars and Cancer. Don't start the fight. But if somebody starts the fight with you, finish it. Capiche? Anyway, I'm going to talk about that because during that period in Carter era, it was fucking demoralizing. Gas prices, OPEC, gas rationing, interest rates through the fucking roof, right? And even the cars they made were shit. The 70s malaise. There's no war. Pretty much the war is over, but really the war is on the American people. Now, I think ultimately Carter's a setup for Reagan. And you go back and you look at it, and it goes all the way into Iran-Contra. The whole thing with the Shah replacing him, right, with the Ayatollah, that all happens in early 1979. That's on Carter's watch. And then right after that, the hostage crisis, and he's done, he's cooked, he's toast. And almost to the day, Reagan gets sworn in, and around, lets the hostages go. I remember when it happened, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is this? He gets elected, and they let him go? What kind of gig do these guys have together? Like, you would have to be Roger Daltrey from Tommy to not figure out that something was not up with that, right? I mean, I was 20 years old, and I could even smell it. I could smell it. It was easy, and it was all set up, right? And because for whatever reason, Reagan couldn't drum up enough support to fucking beat Gerald Ford in the primaries. It was just weird. So I guess they needed to tilt the playing field. Carter was a terrible president. So we'll get into some of that Mars and Cancer on Sunday night. The schedule moving forward, it's going to be a bit spotty since I'm moving next week. We'll do the Sunday night show We'll do serious sports on Monday night. And we'll do the weather. I do not think I'm going to be doing 15 minutes of flame this week. And I'm moving next Friday. So there won't be any Astro Weather or 15 minutes on Friday. So just mark that in your calendar. But I will do the first Sunday night Astro Live from the new location on Sunday night. Fingers crossed. It will be a Mercury retrograde. I did make the contract with the movers before the retrograde. And I'm okay with that. As long as you make your contracts before Mercury retrograde, if you do an event with Mercury retrograde, it should be fine. Just saying. The only thing that I would put an asterisk on is getting married. Even if you proposed during a Mercury direct, which isn't too bad. Although I proposed and got married on a Mercury retrograde because that's what happens when you're in Vegas. Let's see, who else do we have? Cognitive dissonance. I love that name. Sober is good. Yeah, I agree. The news memorandum. Give a shout out to our friend JJ Rain de Blanc. By the way, if you're looking for a Christmas gift, go to JJ's website. Tom, if you could put JJ's link to JJ's website in the text, that'd be awesome. She's got some fine jewelry in a variety of it. Kelly and kids, good to see you. Soul Travel, love being sober. It's those moments, man. You know, when you get the most sober is when somebody dies. Death brings the deepest sobriety, right? It's a sobriety that cleanses. It's really interesting. Really, really interesting. My man, Mark S., speaking of a Taurus, the Taurus who will never bore us. Mark S. Charlie's been sober for 24 hours. Well, if I had a drink, I would toast you to the next 24. Let's see. Simple Rex Sober is a good song. Great band. Soberlicious. Goddess in the Green, man. Checking Grace here from BC, Canada. Well, thanks for checking in with us. And of course, one of our favorite Capricorns, LMM. She's here. The great Leela did a fantastic job in Texas. Moniz Phoenix. Hello, Moniz. Happy Friday back to you. Sandra Jack Shaw, SJS, speaking of Sagittarius. We got a wild one in the house there. Let's see, Diane Evans is here. Claire, checking in from, it was Claire's from Scotland, right? Claire's from Scotland. CR user, moving can be hard on cats. I know, right? So Jasper, let's track Jasper's moves. Jasper's first move was off the streets of San Francisco. Jasper was a street cat. He was a street cat. And the street person who had possession of Jasper either got picked up. That was back in the days where they pick up people and poop in San Francisco, believe it or not. Or maybe the street person had a pang of conscience and brought Jasper to the animal shelter. Back in California, we called it the SPCA. So his first move was from the streets to the shelter. Then his second move was from the shelter to Albany, California, where he spent about, year and a half, maybe. His next move was from Albany, California to Point Richmond, where he and the late great Rosie began to live with me. His next move was all the way from California to Texas on a plane. And then from there, he moved in with me again in my first apartment in Texas, which I didn't like. So I upgraded and went two flights up. So he moved again. He loved that place. And then I moved again in the same apartment complex and he moved there. This is all with Rosie. And then we moved to another apartment complex in Fredericksburg. Then we moved to a house in Fredericksburg. And now here we are in the country. So Jasper is a veteran with moves. He'll hide out for about a day and eventually merge and start. I have no idea how Peachy is going to react to this. She's a wild card, literally a wild card. So we'll see what happens. And then there's this black cat that's been hanging out here that I feed daily, and she's feral, but she's getting closer and closer. So the plan is to get a cat trap and trap her, and then take her to a vet, have her checked out, and then after that, have the vet give her a little sedative, and she's coming. She's coming with us. I have no idea how that's going to work out, but if I don't do it, she's going to be here kind of alone and come by and looking for food every day. And I'm kind of a softie when it comes to animals. Let's see. Cassandra Lynn. What's happening, Cassandra? Started boxing at 0 years old. Coaches lied about my age. So done with fighting. I think it's important to know how to defend oneself. Truly. Because if you know how to defend yourself, you can always walk away and not feel bad. Right? I mean, that's one of the things that karate taught me when I was doing karate a lot when I was younger, was that you knew that there was a pretty good chance that you could probably wipe the floor with the person if you were any good and had been doing it for a while. And so there wasn't this like ego hit or, personality affliction. You could walk away without shame. And it was training that did that, right? Training gave the individual the benefit of walking away and not feeling bad about it. And we live in a culture now where everything is all about Big Brother, right? Big Brother. Go to Big Brother. Go to the teacher. Go to the principal, right? Go tell the sponsors he's not being a nice person. Don't advertise there, right? It's all about escalating to authority. And when I was it's really funny when you have a kid, right? And you're a first time parent, and I like many of you, I said to myself, I'm going to do it differently than my father. I'm going to raise my kid differently. But there were certain things that my father did do that I also wanted to incorporate. So I wanted to make sure that my kid knew how to take care of himself. So I got him into jiu-jitsu at about 2.5 or 3. And he kept doing that until he was about 7. So he was pretty good at it. He was pretty good. He's got Mars and Taurus. So he was good at grappling and stuff like that. And so I just wanted to make sure that he would never be bullied. I mean, that was my goal for him. You learn to take care of yourself, right? And I was very, I wouldn't say strident. I was committed to it. So one day I was down in Berkeley, and there's this, 5th Street in Berkeley, where there's a bunch of fucking fancy shops, right? And the Southern Poverty Law Center was down there. And you could see them, they had all the red vests on, and they had their little clipboards, and they were taking donations so that they could lobby to stop bullying. And I'm like, this is just fucking ridiculous. Because what happens, and you guys all know this, right? You turn your kids into something that's so dependent upon the state and authority that they're just going to do it at every turn. And I'm like so against that. And if every kid, boy and girl, knew how to take care of themselves, it's kind of like if everybody carried a gun. Some people think, well, gee, maybe I shouldn't cross that person. They might be carrying, right? It's kind of like that. If everybody knew how to take care of themselves, there's a better chance that people would respect. And the thing about martial arts is that you learn discipline, right? You learn discipline, respect, tradition. I did a stint at Taekwondo when I was in high school. It was the best thing for me. I was fucking up in my life. I had the wrong friends, and boy, did it come along at the time that I needed it. And it was my father that got me involved with it. And I just saw the effect it had on my life, right? And if more people had that, there's a very good chance we'd be very different as a society. Because what are they pushing? Or what were they pushing? And they're still pushing it now, which is, it's the principal society or the teacher society or the authority society, and deferring to these authority figures who are supposedly going to be there and come in and make it all good. But you never so I used to talk about this a lot on my daily, and I use the term psychic immunity. That when you have to go up against a threat, a bully, that if you do it, and you do it in a way that at least is committed, if not informed and capable, you build up psychic immunity, right? This is what happens. And all these conflicts are rites of passage. And they happen when we're young, right? Because what happens is that pecking orders are established, hierarchies are established, right? And you can see a generation that did not know how to deal with that, and they turned away from it, right? So there's a term for them. They're called incels, because they've turned away from having to deal. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, because a lot of them were not well equipped. Men have had a very difficult time. Boys have had a very difficult time in our society, and I'm an advocate, a real advocate for empowering young men, because they've been disempowered for decades. So I'm not saying that it's a character flaw in them. Society did not teach them or honor their ability to say, no, I'm not going to put up with this. And somewhere along the way, right, we got into this kind of babysitter society. Go tell the babysitter. The babysitter will break it up, right? And that's a part of it. So if we had a culture where individuals could learn how to take care of themselves, that when these conflicts happen, you build what I would call psychic immunity, so that down the line, you are less potentially capable of being the prey, right? You're less potentially capable of being the prey. Now, you don't necessarily want to be the predator, because that is a very weird kind of duality, which is very commonplace in this realm. But you don't want to be the prey. And all that stuff gets sorted out very early on. I mean, even in my youth, there were times where, when I got into fights when I was a kid, sometimes I did okay, sometimes I didn't do okay. But there were times that I look back and say, you know what? I wish I would have done something about that. Like the one event, right? There was maybe one or two events. I wish I would have done something about that. Because you can't, those things will come back, by the way. Those events come back, and they're usually around your Chiron return. Usually, not always. Anyway, I'm sort of going on a bit of a tangent here, but we got into Mars. Let's see, who else do we have? Goddess in the Green Man says, I love being a Pisces. You and Rick should get together. You should, sprinkle a little pixie Pisces dust in Rick's direction. Esperanza Vince Tarot is here. We're glad you made it. Let's see. One of the most creative signs, if not the most. I would agree with that. I think the two most creative signs are Pisces and Leo. I've always said it. Pisces and Leo. They make the best actors, and I think the best artists. That's not to say that other signs can't be good artists, or there isn't some inherent artistic value in other signs. But to me, those are the two most creative signs. Let's Pisces, I adore her, very creative. Simple Rick loves art. The flag of my avatar was a large mural painted on the rock in Flint, Michigan, July 4th, and no help. Oh, cool. Well, let's bring it up here, Rick. Let's see what we got. There we go. See? Redemption. There's always redeeming value. Glemma is appreciating doing an Astro Live today. Well, thanks, Glemma. I appreciate you're here. Oh. Oh, so we have Axel's mom sitting in today on the way to a basketball tournament. All right, go Axel. Go Axel. Speaking of Pisces, our boy Axel is the next Nikola Jokic. Go Axel. I'd love to go see one of his games one of these times. You got to let me know. But don't let him know. I'll just show up in the stands one of these days. I think it is fake news, Fran. Cheeky Monkey's here. Speaking of Pisces, we got a theme going on. She's giving us a hug. My dad says Jay Leno hit on him at the gas station. Why do I think that that is true? Well, first of all, Jay Leno doesn't have any kids. And it seems like gas stations are places where that shit happens. There is this guy, I forget his name. He's this infamous character. He's still alive. And he's written this really salacious tell-all book about all of his affairs with people. He came out. I think he came out of the Navy and got a job at a gas station. And was kind of a good-looking guy, whatever, kind of rugged, good-looking. And the actor Walter Pidgeon drove in one day and basically wanted to know if he wanted to make some money. And he was like, how? And Walter Pidgeon basically said, let me give you a blowjob. If you've ever seen Walter Pidgeon, he's one of these very stately kinds of characters. So that encounter with Walter Pidgeon got him connected with all of these Hollywood people. So he wound up being a fixer. And they're all fucking just, one way, two way, three way, upside, downside, you name it. This is back in the day, they were game. So it doesn't surprise me. Let's see. Brandy Herrera is here. What's happening, Brandy? The brother roommate is a May 1st, 1979 Taurus. It was a good card by Ford. Kind of saved their ass a little bit. Susie, born in Fontana. What's going on, Susie? Katie, I'm a 5-5 Taurus. We got a Taurus Pisces theme going on. It's a very fertile chat today. S.J. Anderson, yeah, I've talked to him about it. We'll see if we can get him on a Sunday night. He would be a great guest. I really like him. He's a good dude. Let's see, and a very good astrologer. Let's see who else. Jay Leno was just in what, Elon Musk's truck, the Cybertruck. Tom said it was demoralizing as fuck. It was terrible. It was a terrible time. My dad couldn't stand him. Astro, Anagram, Rotas, Sator. You could go Taurus too if you just went T-O-R-A-S, since we're playing with the Taurus theme. Chevy Chase made fun of Ford. That was not hard to do. He was kind of an idiot. Let's see. His brother Billy Carter. I liked Billy. Billy was the guy that made Jimmy Carter human. Carter was fake as fuck. I agree with you. Let's see, who else do we have? He was totally back. He was backed by the Trilateral Commission. I think he was just a setup for Reagan. Looks like the Doors to me. It is the Doors. Dan Berman. All right, my screen is all blurry. Nice. Hope it's not my screen. Nixon was another coup d'etat. Absolutely. Mika, happy Friday to you. William Pals. What's going on, William? Let me do a reset. I'll be right back. Don't go away. We're going to do a reset here. Okay, usually when I do that, it helps. Just to let you know. The Great Reset. Fran, great minds think alike. Let's see. User 13. That's okay. We're just getting started. All right, who else do we have? Billy beer must have been crap. We had some. In fact, when my father passed away, he left me 2 6-packs of Billy beer, which I sold at a garage sale. It was bad. Not good. I even drank one many years later. Swear to God. I think I popped one in 2011. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Oh, we have some Wilt Chamberlain talk. Shirley, what's going on, Shirley? Yeah, we're just messing things up here today. Did anyone see Alex Jones with Tucker? I got hit on by the drummer from Chicago in Dana Point. My brother-in-law was hit on by Rock Hudson. I think Rock did that a lot. I got to go. Wilt Chamberlain hit on me at a track meet. This is from Christine. Okay. Did you take Wilt Chamberlain up on that? I got to read through this. I want to find the analog Xmas music. I love the intro music. It's a record called Santa, Switched on Santa. And that was the only track I could find. I think it may be on one of the music services. It's licensed by the Orchard. Okay, I got to find out what happened with Wilt Chamberlain. 15 years old. Well, you're a little young for that. Wilt was an interesting character. Wow, that's a story. That is a story. Christine, you never cease to surprise us. Better, yes, not frozen. I'm hoping this is a great comment. Doors of perception cleansed. Nice one, Luby. I'm hoping that the new location is going to provide better cable and internet. Because it's not, then it's the computer, and we're off on another tangent. Scuba Kel's in Indonesia. She is searching for subaqueous alien species. That's right. She is a USO hunter. All right. Let's see. I had a great convo with Jason Bonham and didn't know who he was. Oh, so we're going a little celebrity stuff here now. If you're late, Jim Morrison would have been 80 years old today. Don't like Santa. I was Santa one time. I rode on a fire truck in a Christmas parade. I was 20 years old. And then they took me to an underground parking structure. This is in San Mateo, California. Underground parking structure where there was about a quarter mile of kids all waiting to sit on my lap. It was fun. It was fun. Let's see. Anybody else? You can see that. You can see that I was Santa. Rush Limbaugh looking sharp. You know, that's one. Now, Rush Limbaugh. Okay, so there's two. We're going to get into this with Morrison. There's two potentials that Jim Morrison might have become. I'm kind of the mind that Morrison didn't die. It's all too suspicious and weird, right? He's supposed to be buried in, what is it? The cemetery in Paris is La Péchère or whatever it's called. He's there with all the great symbolist poets. His last day, according to this documentary I saw, he spent with this writer filmmaker named Alain Robbe-Grillet. And according to Robbe-Grillet, Morrison would not let him go. It was kind of weird. And it got really, really late. They spent the day together, and Morrison did not want to be alone. I don't know what that means. But there is a first-hand account of his last day with the poet filmmaker Alain Robbe-Grillet. Pierre Lachey, thank you, D.E. Saccone. Thank you. Yes, the rumor is that either Rush or Chevy Chase was Jim Morrison. It's kind of, when you look at them, you could kind of make a connection, a weird connection. Morgan Freeman became Jimmy. That's what that's what I've heard too. Morgan Freeman has been very sly about that. Very sly about that. Even if he isn't Jimmy, he knows that there's a comparison. And I think he pokes around with that. Let's see. He got knocked off. I found the full Switched On Santa album on YouTube. There you go, Evangeline. You got it. And you can download that video, of course, for personal use only. Okay. 1971, Morrison died unexpectedly. Morgan Freeman's great. You could tell when Morgan Freeman was doing all that public service stuff for the shot, he did not want to do it. He did not believe it for 1 second. He was forced to do it. I kind of felt bad for the guy, honestly. Really felt bad for him. I gave Morgan Freeman a pass. Some of those other people didn't get a pass. By the way, here's another one for you guys. I don't know if you have seen this one. I'm just going to throw this up here. This is under the faked one's death category. So there is this theory that John Lennon faked his death and became this guy named Mark Stacer. Are you guys familiar with this one? It's very interesting. So Mark Stacer is a Lennon impersonator. What's really interesting is that this Mark Stacer guy is a Canadian, and if you buy into this, right, that Lennon. By the way, I do think Lennon. There's a bunch of high strange with Lennon's death, but if Lennon faked his death and became this Mark Stacer guy, who was a Canadian, and then theoretically Paul McCartney died, and the new Paul would be like Billy Shields, right? Supposedly Billy Shields was a Canadian who became Paul McCartney, and John Lennon was John Lennon who became Mark Stacer, who was a Canadian. Anyway, if you haven't seen the Mark Stacer stuff, I'm just going to put it up here really quickly. I'm not going to play it, but there's a whole rabbit hole with this Mark Stacer guy who sounds a lot like Lennon. All right, here it is, full screen. So that's Mark Stacer. So that would be a total hidden in plain sight thing, wouldn't it? It's a strange world. That's why I love the music. Love music, the Moody Blues. I like the Moody Blues. I totally believe the Lennon thing too. Yeah, so I don't always agree with Miles Mathis, by the way, but there's too much weirdness around Mark David Chapman. The timing is just all too weird. So I could see the whole Lennon thing being. But the thing that happens, right, with these people is that even though they fake their death in our minds, they still die. So they're no longer around, and there's a psychic impact on our lives. And I don't know. They couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So even if people had enough information, they wouldn't be able to, I think, embrace it. That's my 2 cents. Let's see. Billy Shears is for sure not Paul. Somebody ain't Paul. What's his name? Campbell? That guy's not Paul McCartney. There's nothing you can tell me that dude that we're seeing now is Paul McCartney. No. The height is disparate. The ears are disparate. Different rabbit hole. Let's get into some astrology. I want to make sure we keep the audience. All right, let's get into the start. Not the start. Let's do the Astro Weather. Thanks again for being here. It's a great chat today. Wilt Chamberlain. That is funny. That is really funny. Okay. Oh, that's Jim Morrison's Melbourne chart. Hold on. We stop sharing that. Let's get that out of there. Buried under the piles of JPEGs on my desktop. I'm not a very good Virgo. I think I'm failing that course. But at least I am consistent and I show up. Okay. Maybe this is it. Maybe it's Pluto. We started the show at I did 11:55. I guess I just kept rolling with Jim Morrison's birthday. Hold on a second. Is that right? Yeah. It's got to be Pluto, right? I think it's Pluto. Pluto on the ascendant when we started the show. 28 Capricorn. Maybe that's the sobriety. When we've been talking about death a lot too, people dying, not dying, faking their death. Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac, the 12th house, leaving the chart. It's an interesting marker for today's show. And as we move into the weekend, that moon is at 24 Libra. Look at that. Right there, 24 Libra. So by later tonight, early tomorrow, that moon is going to be in Scorpio. So we're going to have a moon-Venus conjunction as the moon is balsamic. That is the story of the weekend. That is the story of the weekend. And the moon will, maybe by mid-afternoon tomorrow, it moves out of that square with Pluto. But it's kind of a setup, right? There's a sense of emotional urgency. Like even though the moon in Libra is doing its best to be balanced and fair. And by the way, this degree of the moon at the start of the show was the degree of the eclipse that happened in October on the 14th. So this is an interesting degree for the moon, for sure. We've had other Libra moons since the eclipse, but kind of grabbing our attention now. So go back and look at what was going on with you around the eclipse. That would be some degree of representation. Now, obviously, at that time, right, the sun was there and the moon, because we are dealing with an eclipse. The sun was there and illuminating things on a relational level, right? Because the sun was in Libra at 24, and for a brief period of time, right, the light is suspended, and some very interesting things were happening during that eclipse for me, just in terms of what I was seeing with the sun. First of all, and I was not alone, I saw two suns. Now, maybe that was just the effect of the eclipse. And then I started to see all of this. I didn't see a black sun. I saw all of this, for lack of a better term, electrical activity inside the sun. And it was, and I couldn't figure out whether or not I was having some issues with my eyes, or because I wasn't seeing a black sun. There was something happening. And some of us at the event talked about, well, this, I hate to use the word, but it was like, okay, there's kind of an upgrade going on here. And I remember right after the event, and we were sitting around this room that I'm in right now, and I was with Donna, and I just kept having this weird psychic communication with Donna. And I would think something, she would say it, and I would think something, she would say it. And this is on the heels of the event, and that has not really abated in some ways. And so here we have the moon at the same degree as that eclipse. And in terms of phenomena, I think this is one of those days where, it's an interesting day for phenomena. And it's starting off this weekend that takes us into a very deep and intense place around relating and understanding patterns around relating. And the thing with Scorpio, right, is that you can't really get out of it by soft selling it. Now, luckily, we have this, maybe it's this sober Mercury in Capricorn. Maybe that's what it is. We have this Mercury that will allow us to engage in a deep way on an emotional level that can go into the those darker spaces of our feelings and relating. And Mercury in Capricorn is kind of very matter of fact, right? It's very Jack Webb, just the facts, man. Just the facts. Luckily, we have this trine with Jupiter with Mercury, so it's expanding the potential for conversation. Right? You're not in a dead end. Although with the opposition and the moon moving into Scorpio this weekend with the opposition of Jupiter, there can be a tendency of like all or nothing. Jupiter's all, like it's all. And in the balsamic phase, the moon is like nothing. There's nothing here. There's nothing left. Right? I mean, that's kind of what it's setting up to be, but that's not necessarily true. That is kind of a false dichotomy, and you don't want to get caught into it. Right? This would be like the energy of the ultimatum. Do not get into an ultimatum space unless you're willing to deal with the consequences of the ultimatum. That's a whole other conversation. I think, and especially now because the moon is at these final degrees of Libra, that the best way to get to the bottom of things is to have an inquiry. And not an inquisition, but an inquiry. And an inquiry is when people ask questions, very simple questions. What do you want? What would you like? Where are you going? Where are we going? What is the potential? What's the fear? What's the, in Scorpio, you get into the fear. There's no doubt. No doubt you get into the fear, right? No doubt. And the idea is that with more information on the table, and especially emotional information, Mercury trining Jupiter coming down right here, it expands the conversation. You don't get caught up in the cul-de-sac of all or nothing in ultimatumville. Reminds me of the episode where Larry gave Cheryl the ultimatum based on the therapist, Steve Coogan, based on his advice, and it didn't go well for Larry. By the way, Curb Your Enthusiasm is coming back for its final season. I can't think of another person that I like least but makes me laugh more than just about anybody than Larry David. We've done his chart. It's a wacky. He's in his chart. You can see his chart everywhere. So here we go. Balsamic, right? Balsamic, this next 48 hours. But come Monday, with that moon coming in here, we get into that new moon space in Sagittarius. Boy, it's kind of one of those rebirth moments as you come out of the 8th house and the 9th house. But something has to change. We are in the throes of transformation right here, right? But I think it's fair. I think Mercury can be fair in this regard. And we talked about this last week as Mercury moves more into this square with Chiron. You have to probe into areas where you feel uncomfortable. You have to speak about things. You have to be able to articulate things that are uncomfortable. You have to face your fears. Face rejection. Right? To me, this is where you get stronger. This is where you get stronger. We still have this Mars Sun solar two-step going on, which I really like. It's in my first house. I've been feeling it in a good way. And what do you do with it, right? I think if you are, and I've been feeling a lot of this, right? I've been feeling a lot of, I was watching Jimmy Dore last night, and he had a clip from Neil Oliver. Brilliant clip. And what Neil Oliver, and I was going to get into this on Sunday night, but I may as well get into it here. He encapsulated the theater of tyranny in such a that kind of uniquely Irish way, right? Where his language was colorful and descriptive and anchored with emotion and brilliantly and left no stone unturned. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's where we are. That's where we are. We're at this point where I think people are understanding. They're finally out. We're finally starting to get this picture now that the absolute iron jaws of tyranny are staring us right in the face. That's how close we are. That is how close we are. And that's going to get people's attention. And I think with this Sun-Mars conjunction, and there's a lot of bravery out there right now. There's a lot of bravery. There are people that are saying things and acting on things that are very inspirational. Like line in the sand kind of moment, right? Line in the sand, like no more. No more. So how do you deal with it? Well, you make a commitment to call out tyranny. And this is where the Sun-Mars conjunction comes in. And for some people, that's terrifying. But it's right there. There's that trine with Chiron, right? Take action. Be bold. Fortune favors the bold. We have to act. Now, it's better if you're informed, but how much more information do we need? It's all out there. We can see it all, right? We can see everything that's happening, everything that's being planned out. Are you interested in drinking black fly larva milk as a milk substitute? Are you interested in driving a car that has a kill switch in it? Are you interested in having a digital currency that is capped and connected to your social credit score? Are you interested in these things? Do they sound enjoyable to you? Are you interested in people shaming you because you drive a car that's not electric, that you eat meat or protein? Are you interested in that life? It's coming. And if we don't push back on it now, and we're right up against the wall here. Right? I was reading where by the Biden administration, here we go, right? We're coming into the holidays. And they always sneak that legislation that puts the screws to you right before they all go home and are unreachable. Biden administration is getting ready to pass this act where every single standing structure, including the house that you're living in or renting, well, if you're renting, you're not going to be responsible for it, but your rent will go up. Every single structure has to be upgraded to, guess what? World Economic Forum, UN, Paris Protocol, climate change standards. That is coming. It is coming quick. The bars, the invisible bars of the cage are coming down one at a time, right? And this is where we are with this Sun-Mars conjunction. The closer we get to Neptune here, the more the power dissipates. When the moon swings around, right? I'm starting to talk about some kind of dark things here. But when the moon swings around and we have this new moon in Sagittarius, and then we have the moon in Sag, sun here, Mars. It's a dedication moment. What are you going to dedicate your life to? It better be freedom. It better be freedom, and it better be action oriented. Sagittarius is action oriented. Even if you write something, like that was an act. Like that was, to me, when I heard that piece by Neil Oliver, was fucking inspiring. Got to do something. And here we're cycling through our fears with this balsamic moon in Scorpio. It's going to catch this Uranus opposition on the way, right? That's a jolting, kind of a jolting experience. We're kind of shocked out of our comfort with this opposition. Let's see what else is going on there. Don't dissipate your energy. Be selective. Be selective with your outrage. Right? Be selective. Don't cast your pearls before swine. But when that moon comes in, right? When that moon comes in and it is new, we hit that new moon, you got to make a dedication and a consecration to being true and free and authentic. There's no, and this is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think we have one more new moon before the end of the year in Capricorn. So this is the second to last new moon. And, this is a mutable sign, obviously. So you can alter your path a little bit here. Right? This is the great thing about mutability. You can alter your path. As long as you connect with it on an authentic emotional level. I think this is heady stuff. Where we are, it's really being triggered right here in this path of the moon moving forward. Along the way this weekend, we're also going to get that moon trine to Saturn. I like it, right? So even if you go into deep emotional content and territory, Saturn is the ballast. Saturn is like the anchor that allows you. We got Kelly in chat. Maybe she can come up with a diving metaphor here. Allows you to go deeper, right? Deeper, safer. Now, the moon will eventually catch up with Saturn in the square in one of its final balsamic phases, right? So we get to put our emotions to the test. It's an interesting chart, especially here, in here. 2024, as the kids say, is going to be a banger, total banger. Get ready. Enjoy yourself. That's the other part of this. I mean, I think that, there's going to come a day in the not too distant future where we're going to look back on these times with a degree of fondness. Let's keep that in mind, because things are going to get hot. They're going to get hot. They're going to get heavy in 2024. We got that Mars cycle. We have the big eclipse in April. There's, ingresses with Pluto into Aquarius. It's going to be a ride. It's the year of the dragon, too. And we know that China reveres the dragon. Oh, yes, they do. And they live by the Chinese calendar. And then some. All right, let's do this. I want to play you guys something because we're going to go into the star of the day. Jim Morrison. I know a lot of you guys have heard this before. I used to play this on my Blog Talk radio show. It was part of my intro. I'm going to play it again. This is classic. Hold on. All right, this is from a concert. I don't know where the concert was. Let's see if I can find out. Boston, 1970. Second show. I think Sandra would have had to have been 10 years old to go to this. This is Jim Morrison's rant on astrology, which is hilarious. I used to play this all the time.
Hey, listen, man. Listen, man. I don't know how many of you people believe in astrology. Yeah, that's right, baby. I am a Sagittarius, the most philosophical of all the signs. But anyway, I don't believe in it. I think it's a bunch of bullshit myself. But I'll tell you this, man. I don't know what's gonna happen, man. But I want to have my kicks before the whole shithouse goes up in flames. All right.
That's fucking hilarious. He denounces Sagittarius and astrology, and then goes on to say the most fucking Sagittarian thing possible, right? It's fucking hilarious. Love it. It's the greatest case for astrology. Jim Morrison denouncing astrology. Isn't that hilarious? It's pure gold. Pure gold. Yeah, totally. Val Kilmer was great as Jim Morrison. He was incredible. He was possessed. He was possessed by the spirit of Morrison. Let's see. Leela. Where's the new government? Hold on, let's see this. Robert, I cast a chart for the new government that's signed, and Sweetie in on full moon, Pluto in the 12th, whistleblower that release on the 1st. That's good. Email it to me. We'll look at it on the Sunday night show. I'd be happy to look at it. Anyone see The Doors live? No. I wish I had. The producer of The Doors was Paul Rothchild. I always thought that was interesting. Okay. Let's see. The documentary about Val Kilmer was depressing. I couldn't see it. I saw it. It was available on Amazon. I didn't want to watch it. Val is an interesting character. I have kind of an inside story about Val Kilmer. You want to hear it? It's not a huge story, but I don't want to slander him. But I knew a guy through my friend Stephen Kent. His name was David Hudson, and David Hudson is he's an Aborigine and didgeridoo player, and he was in the movie The Island of Dr. Moreau with Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando, and he had some encounters with Val that were not cool. I'll just leave it at that. Let's just say this. You don't want to mess with an Aborigine didgeridoo player's didgeridoos. Just saying. All right, let's bring up the Lizard King's chart. Since he is our true Hemp Science star of the day, There we go. All right, let's do a little share here. James Douglas Morrison, born on Wednesday, December 8th, 1943. He'd be 80 years old today. 11:55 a.m. in Melbourne, Florida. Aquarius rising. Well, that makes a lot of sense. South node on the ascendant. So he's got little bit of leftover, got a little leftover business to take care of as a destroyer. You know, when for me, Morris, and for many of you, clearly is a Dionysian figure. And he even saw himself as a Dionysian figure. And the Doors provided the Dionysian soundtrack. And they were the stage band or the house band for the 1960s. You could say the Stones were amazing and big and great. You could say the Beatles were amazing and big and great. You had sort of the beginnings of Led Zeppelin in late 1969, the Who, the Yardbirds. To me, they're the house band for the 1960s. And it's because of what Morrison represents, right? Even Mick Jagger agreed to change the lyrics on Let's Spend the Night Together on the Ed Sullivan Show. Jim Morrison refused to change the word higher. And in fact, he yelled it at the top of his lungs. So he's even more rebellious than Mick Jagger, right? I mean, that's his cred right there. So he's a destroyer. And they're the house band for the 60s, the Dionysian rite of the 1960s. And then when you go really deep into Morrison, of course, you run into his father, who is right there at the Gulf of Tonkin. Rear Admiral Douglas Morrison. If you have not read Tales from the Laurel Canyon, I highly recommend it. I remember when it first came out and I started to read that thing, I couldn't wait for the next installment. And then you get into all the high strange of the music scene, Hollywood, and the military industrial complex. It's a great series. I guess you can there's a book, but I just remember when it was coming out and I was just like, fuck, I'm so glad I found this. And Morrison, plays a role in it, right? He's from Washington, D.C. Of course, because his father was in the Navy, Pentagon, all that. And it's just one of those weird little coincidences. But when you see all these weird little coincidences of that entire scene, then all of a sudden they don't become coincidences anymore. He went to kindergarten with Gail Sloatman, and Gail Sloatman would wind up becoming a member of the GTOs and then eventually marry Frank Zappa, right? So what are the fucking odds of Morrison and Frank Zappa's wife going to kindergarten and eventually showing up and going to LA and being a part of the magical mystery tour of the 1960s. So I think they're the house band. The Doors, the house band in the 60s. You got Paul Rothchild producing them. Again, go figure that. And he is this Dionysian Pied Piper that sort of opens these gateways psychically, sonically, musically, whatever your opinion is on his music or the Doors music, that's what they're doing, right? Literally, they are opening doors in people. Good doors, bad doors. I associate the Doors music and Morrison's influence as quite dark. It's very dark. And in an interesting, weird way, it's also dark and appropriate for the times. The 60s, they come along right around 68, 69, right around their late 60s. They're not a summer of love band. He's got more in common with the Beats than he does with the hippies, even though he's in Southern California. And everything is dark. Riders on the Storm, which Lila brought about. Come on, baby, light my fire. I mean, it's, the end. He gets into this whole kind of Oedipal drama, right? I mean, this is, he is a troubadour that is leading people into the underworld. And when you see his relocated chart, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? So in that regard, he is an incredibly important figure in this socially engineered part of our culture. Now you have to ask yourself, well, how much did he really know? Like, was he in on it? Well, let's look at his chart. The thing that's fascinating is this Uranus, Vesta, Mars. He's got Saturn in Gemini as well, but we're just going to look at Mars and Uranus in Gemini. It represents two people. Now, some people, if you wanted to follow the mythology, and Morrison has a mythology. He's a mythological character. There's the story where the family's traveling across the country and they're going to California, and he's a little kid and he sees the car wreck, and it's the Native American tribe somewhere in Arizona, and he sees spirits, and one of the spirits attaches itself to him. That's the mythology, right? So that in and of itself is part of this, Gemini expression. Like there's white boy Jim, and then there's red boy Jim, right? I mean, that's part of this. What else is going on here? When we get into Gemini, we get into things like, partitioning off the brain and consciousness and the mind. So the question here, which theoretically might be useful to be asked, is Jim Morrison a project? Because we're kind of seeing this, right? And it's all fourth house. So it's in the home. And of course, Mars rules the military. Oh, and there's Saturn, which is the father. I mean, to me, it's just mind-blowing. And one of those, we kind of get used to it when we talk about these things. But when you put it into perspective, his father was there for one of the biggest false flags in this country's history. His father sells it. And then this guy becomes the Lizard King and the Dionysian prince of the counterculture. And it's all down here, right? It's in his roots. So you have to ask yourself the question, is Jim Morrison a project? You could walk away looking at that and saying, yeah, pretty good chance. And even Saturn with here in the fifth house, the father, right? Strict father plays a role. And Morrison does not have a happy, playful childhood. Saturn in the fifth house, you're not bothered. It's like sports, fuck sports. I'll read Baudelaire, right? I mean, that's kind of Saturn in the fifth. So everything is starting down here in his chart. But you can also see that very Uranian and kind of destructive energy getting channeled through the ascendant, Uranus in trine with his ascendant, Mars in trine with his ascendant. And, listen to that crowd. He's charismatic. He can move energy. What do I need to say about this aspect of him? He's dangerous. Jim Morrison is dangerous. He is danger personified. And he's a Sagittarius, and his sun is in the 10th house. So usually people who have sun in the 10th house know that they have to do something in the world, whatever it is, right? I think it's also interesting that he would eventually move to Paris, which is a very ninth house kind of thing. And he would have a relationship with theoretical death in Paris with Venus and Scorpio. And, his relationships are tempestuous. He's got that Venus-Pluto square. Very, very intense, right? He's got that Pluto conjunct the true node in Leo. And to me, when you get into Pluto and Leo, you're in Boomerville, right? Pluto and Leo is Boomerville. And this guy with his true node conjunct Pluto, he is the Plutonian symbol for the boomers, right? This is who he is. He is the symbol of the underworld, right? That is his gig. It's right there. And forget him being faithful. Just leave that out of the discussion. Jupiter and Leo conjunct Regulus. He'll do whatever the fuck he wants in a relationship. Are you kidding me? Come home late, not come home at all. Bring somebody home with him. Forget it. This is a guy. You leave the barn door open, you might be okay. What's interesting is Chiron here. And what is that, 15 degrees? So something happened to him between 14 and 16. What degree is that? More than likely 15 and 16. Pivotal, probably pivoted from cowboys and Indians to, I don't know, self-destruction, right? There's a pivot there because everything, Uranus, Mars, Saturn, they're all squaring that Chiron. So right around 16, it's a big, and it's not long after that. He's pretty young when the doors start, right? So the 63, he's 20 years old. And I think he meets all those guys in college at around 26. So he's getting kind of cranked up for his Saturn return, isn't he? That's interesting. 43, 53, 63, 20. So in 67, he's 20, 24? 24 and 67, 25, 60. So right there, he's about 25 years old. Well, something happened to him around 16. Big change, big pivot, right? Maybe he got over some kind of weird hang up or fear. Who knows? Maybe he had to do with the programming he got. You could make a case that he's a project. He's clearly got the split in him. I mean, he's even like multiple identities. Mr. Mojo Rising, the Lizard King, Jim Morrison. Like, it's somewhere in the pockets of all the kind of Gemini identity, you'll find a version of Jim Morrison. Moon in Taurus, he liked the good life, didn't he? And he's got Moon in the third house. The Moon in Taurus is kind of ancient, right? It's very pagan. Very, very pagan. Who did he get involved with? Patricia Keneally, right? There's that scene in the Doors movie. It's an amazing scene, right? Where they so one of the stories about Jim Morrison was that he did tarantula venom. And that's what that scene with Patricia Keneally in New York when he's hanging out with Warhol and all those people in the movie. And they're like dancing around her flat, like, these, just unhooked Dionysian spirits, right? It's kind of an amazing scene, actually. So supposedly, she's a witch, right? And they supposedly got married. They have that blood ceremony thing. I think that's all the Danny Sugarman book about Morrison. And that's that Venus in Scorpio. right? The hidden marriage, the occult marriage in the square to Pluto. And she says, you swore till death do us part, right? And he's already married to Pamela. So the story is that Jim Morrison did tarantula venom. Now, I used to work for this amazing, crazy publisher writer at Mondo 2000 named Queen Moo, who was an expert on hallucinatory and psychedelic venoms. She got very close to her doctoral thesis, did field work and everything on it. And she wrote the conclusive article, the definitive article of Jim Morrison doing tarantula venom. And the reason you could tell that he did it is because when he would like arch back in concert, apparently what happens is that tarantula venom unhooks your spine in a way, right? It does something very different to your spine. And apparently, in order for Kilmer to get these supine poses, he had to do a bunch of yoga. It's very unnatural, right? When you look at him, he does these really unnatural arches. Apparently, that's the tarantula venom. And then it unlocks your, basically your cerebral. That it's a fucking rush, right? It's a total rush, from your root chakra to your crown, and there's this kind of supernatural kind of ability that comes along with it. So there's another person who has demonstrated that same kind of unusual supine curvature in the back with that same kind of pose, and that's Patti Smith. And the interesting thing is that Patti Smith is in New York, right around the same time all this is happening. And Patti Smith, of course, was, very into the French symbolist poets like Jim Morrison was. And all those guys used, they were morphine and heroin users. Anyway, I'm kind of getting a bit of a sidetrack here. So Queen Moo, her what she came to the conclusion, and she went through the lyrics of Morrison. Now this flies in the face of Morrison being Rush Limbaugh or Chevy Chase. That he found out apparently that he had testicular cancer, and that he wound up purposefully ODing and killing himself. It's a very interesting article. And the tarantula venom, and in fact, I think the thing that they're doing in the movie, if I'm not mistaken, is so in Italy they have the dance of the tarantella, right? And it's all based on the tarantula, and it's all based on tarantula venom. I think the music might be from that when they're flying around that flat in New York City. So again, we're kind of we're in this intensely narcoticized, Dionysic world with Morrison. And he's a liar too. Like he's got that Mercury Neptune square. And he's got Mercury in Capricorn, so he's very sharp. In as much as he wanted to be Dionysus and to be worshipped as a rock god, he was also very savvy. I think he understood the importance of being a brand that isn't a brand, right? Like to me, that's Mercury. Mercury in Capricorn is very smart in a way that allows a person to get ahead in the world. But then the square with Neptune is that you wouldn't live up to his agreements, wouldn't show up on time. I mean, just stuff like that. I mean, he would be that way anyway, right? Sagittarius, you don't tell them what to do. They're just going to do what they're going to do. And, you hope that they respect you enough so that, they don't trample you under their hooves as they do what they want to do. And come back and tell you and somehow make you simultaneously laugh and cry, right? And he's got that trine with Pluto, which is powerful, right? It's a powerful trine. Anyway, I got into this with this moon thing and the Venus opposition. To me, this is that marriage with Patricia Keneally, right? It's super, it's super pagan and old, and there's that Venus and Scorpio opposition to it. So I think it's a very interesting chart. Grand trine, Moon, Mercury, right? It's pretty wide, but again, it's a Dionysian trine. The Moon is Dionysus. First planet we run into is in his chart. And then he's got this trine with freaking Jupiter, right? He's got a Jupiter trine with his Mercury. Wow. And it's conjunct Regulus. He's a star, right? And he's able to wait till you see the relocated chart. In fact, why don't we go into the relocated chart now? That's not the right one. Hold on. Oh, my piles of JPEGs. Paper mache, Fabergé eggs. All right. So here we go. Jim Morrison. Oh, in the relocated chart. There it is. So this is space relocation, Hollywood, California. Boom. 29 Sag on the ascendant, and there's Mercury. What does he do? He becomes a singer, right? The voice is omnipresent, right? In the chart here. And what do we have here? Well, we got the old underworld. The eighth house. There's Pluto hanging out in the eighth house, right? There's Pluto there. What is it doing? Well, this is true note. It's the underworld. Sun in the 12th house. So simultaneously, in the natal chart, he's got Sun in the 10th, a relocated Sun in the 12th. What do we know about Sun in the 12th people? They want to be seen, but they don't want to be seen. They want to be seen, but they don't want to be seen. And again, it is the house that takes you out of the chart. Neptune now becomes the highest planet. And this is where the Pied Piper effect comes into play, right? Like Neptune is drugs, it's seductive, it's music. And this is the planet that in a lot of ways dominates Morrison's chart in the relocation. It becomes very druggy, very Neptunian. And then we've got these trines going on, right? Uranus and Mars. And this is where they all become active. And this is where the work happens, right? This is all Virgo. This is Virgo's house. He's doing it. He's doing it. And he's throwing that energy right up into the ninth house, which is, again, things like philosophy, the higher mind. And in Neptune, it's druggy. It's druggy. It's otherworldly, right? That's what Neptune does up there. It's exalted in the ninth house. This again, you think about like, well, if Jim Morrison was a project, that's a discussion. But let's take that out of the equation for a minute. If he wasn't a project, could he have had a different path than, say, this one? Could he have been inspiring? Could he have been, I don't know, a conservative like Rush Limbaugh? Now, it's just a question, right? Because that Neptune can be interpreted in a number of different ways, theoretically. But in the case of Morrison, it's the music, right? It is the dream. It is the kind of the narcoticized spell, and it's in Libra. So there's he's got this idea of like Dionysus being shredded by the Furies, which is very Libran, very relational. And here we go, Venus and Scorpio, 10th house. He's a sex symbol, right? That's what people see with Morrison. They see Venus and Scorpio. And again, to me, that's very like Dionysus and the Furies. What was I going to say about this? There's something. Even with Neptune there in the 9th house, right? And this kind of, again, kind of the house band for the 60s. There is something about the music. You cannot deny that some of the music is beautiful. Break On Through to the Other Side, which isn't even his song, is a beautiful song. You got that samba beat. Boom, 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 boom. Touch Me with the strings and everything. I mean, there's a beauty in the door. There's a dark side to it too. And he is the Pied Piper leading it all. It's a very interesting chart. This is where he gets activated. And here you don't know. Oh, I know what I wanted to say about that Neptune. It's an interesting story, and it comes out of Danny Sugarman's book. If you don't know who Danny Sugarman is, he was a young guy that hung out with Jim Morrison. And he's got a lot of firsthand stories. The book is called No One Gets Out of Here Alive. Some of the Doors movie is based on it. Danny Sugarman, I think, was an advisor to the movie. But there's a scene in the book where, and it's a very Neptunian kind of scene, Neptune, where he takes Danny Sugarman to go meet the musician Tim Hardin. There was this guy named Tim Hardin who was part of the LA folk scene. And I think his famous song is Get On Top of Me, Woman. Not a bad song. So Tim Hardin at the time was living up in the LA hills, probably somewhere in the canyon. And Jim takes him there. And at this point, Tim Hardin is, he's a junkie, a hardcore junkie, strung out. He doesn't look good, right? He looks like shit. And Danny Sugarman knew who Tim Hardin was. And Jim Morrison took him there on purpose, which I thought was very interesting because he wanted to show him somebody who'd fucked up. To me, that's very Neptunian. First of all, it's very Sag, because here's Morrison playing the role of a teacher. And, you wouldn't really think that about him. But it's very Neptunian, right? And it's the 9th house, it's higher mind, big life lesson. And he's basically saying, don't do that shit, right? Don't do that. And maybe the Mercury-Neptune square is playing a role there too. Like maybe at this point, he's demonstrating to Sugarman that that's who you don't want to be. So it's the book is really good if you haven't read it. So it all gets set off in LA, right? The chart really gets set off. And he finds a home with the moon in the 4th house. He finds a home. He finds a launching pad for everything. He's got that Jupiter, Mercury, Moon trine. Look at that. Right? Moon trine Jupiter. Mercury doesn't really trine Jupiter, does it? It's Pluto that trines Jupiter. We were looking at that yesterday with Tom Waits. Tom Waits is not born too far away from Jim Morrison. I think Tom Waits born like 45 or something like that. Tom Waits is older than Donald Trump. And Tom Waits has that Mercury-Pluto trine as well, although it's different, right? Tom Waits has Mercury in Sagittarius on the ascendant and Pluto in Leo. And Tom Waits was able to use that trine. I wanted to get into more of that yesterday, but he could use that trine to write and sing and talk about, kind of sordid people and sordid lifestyles and the losers of the world, right? The kind of these eighth house characters, but he would do it not from a condescending place, but from a very heartfelt place. Morrison has it as well, but his Mercury's in a different position, right? Like Tom Waits has it in Sagittarius. And I think Tom Waits is kind of invested in that. He's kind of fair in that way. Morris is more interested in kind of exhuming the archetype, exhuming the spirit, right? Finding this kind of Dionysian connection with Pluto right there, right? Finding that Dionysian connection. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting chart for relocation. Mercury's trying Jupiter, and Pluto's trying the sun, right there. That's the shamanic connection. If you want to use because I think the eighth house is the underworld, right? And Pluto in the eighth house is very shamanic. And there's the true node. Like that's his thing. He's going to go into the dark realm of magic. Wherever you align with morality or religion, the eighth house, Scorpio and Pluto are magic. Right? It's all based on attraction, charisma, intention, sex, energy, right? That's where it happens. And that's what Morrison theoretically is. And Jupiter's more ingressed into the ninth house. So he wants to get his message out to the world. So Jupiter is here, right? Even though we've got all these planets, Jupiter is still in the eighth house. This is where he finds his bounty, his psychic bounty, right? This is where, things get big for him. It's sex, it's the underworld, it's creativity. And Mercury becomes a point of contact for it. It's a really interesting chart. Fascinating. And this is where he becomes Jim Morrison. The natal chart's the natal chart, and it's still part of him. But this is the lair of the Lizard King. All right. Where are we? How are we doing in chat? Let's see what we have here. Thought Waits was younger. He is younger by only about 2 years, I think. Not much though. I think Tom Waits is here. We did him yesterday. I think he's older than Trump. Trump was born in 1947. Remember that. Tom Waits, 1949. My bad. Thank you, Peter. 1949. Still, right? He's 2 years younger than Trump. I love Tom Waits. He's great. Thank you for that. Let's see, anything else? Ricky liked her heroin. Ricky Lee Jones. Let's see. Anything else here? Alan Watts was fascinating. Alan Watts, you could listen to Alan Watts forever. That guy could connect so many fucking dots. He loved his booze. Alan Watts was a big juicer. He was always thinking drunk. All right. I think we're good. We're 49 and 56. Let's see. He died of booze. Yeah, Alan Watts was a big juicer. And even when he was drunk, he could hold court. He lived on this boat in Sausalito. This is a houseboat. I used to hang out at that houseboat. and go to parties on that houseboat. He lived there, and then this director, Andres Varda, lived there. And then after that, all these bohemian artistic types lived on this houseboat. I used to go there. And San Francisco and the Bay Area was chock full of shit like that. And now I live in Fredericksburg and going to move to Kerrville. From Alan Watts' houseboat in Sausalito to Kerrville, Texas. Brandy Herrera, I support you in buying a sailboat. I totally support you in buying a sailboat. Because once you get it, look me up and I'll go on it with you. I think we're done. Have you been watching the banner the whole time? If you type in if you go to True Hemp Science, spend $100 or more, type in 15MINS, guess what you'll get? You'll get free product with your order. Free product. You spend $150 or more, you'll get free shipping, and there's always a money-back guarantee. Give our friend Chris a hand and help out a Main Street business that does a really great job at providing a wonderful product and service for all of us. 15MINS, that's your code to get your free goodies. Let's see. Fun fact, Jeff Porcaro walked out of a Ricky Lee Jones session because she was driving nuts, requesting to play something he thought was stupid. Man, those Porcaro kids. Toto. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks, everybody. This has been the Frdiay FARcast, along with the Astro Weather. We did a little MK Ultra trip down Morrison. Oh, by the way, today is also Sinead O'Connor's birthday. Rest in peace, Sinead. You were a bright and shining star and had a very difficult life. And I hope you're happier, more peaceful wherever you are. And for the rest of you, it's time to leave. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back here on Sunday night. Bye for now.